Ford Mustang designers and engineers were given a simple task: predict the future. It takes years for a vehicle to go from a sketchbook to a dealer lot. Not a major problem when each generation of a vehicle stays really similar throughout its run. But the Mustang was a different kind of car. The Mustang had ambition. Like many top American models, the Mustang evolved year by year through subtle design changes that Ford banked on customers wanting, even if it ramped up development costs. This played heavily into the 1950s and 1960s mindset of keeping up with the Joneses, and automotive marketing teams weren't just about to let that go. I mean, come on. Nobody wanted to have a year-old car sitting in their driveway, right? The neighbors might see. This meant that the first few years of the Mustang were in design before its release. In episode 1 of this series, we took a look at what went into the design and development of those first 4 years of the Ford Mustang. In this episode, we'll look at what went into the last 5, starting with the 1969 model year. While the world was closely watching the release of the Mustang in 1964, work was already beginning on what those same customers might want in a 1969 model. 5 years is a long time out to try to predict the future. And at first, Ford seemed to have gotten it right. Then, not so much. I'm Rick Pierce, a history nerd that loves cars and wants to share some car history nerdery. Welcome to Make and Model. If we're starting with the 1969 model, that means our story actually begins on April 17th, 1964, the day the Mustang was released. And there was a surprise demographic that emerged quickly with those first sales: women. The Mustang was originally marketed as an inexpensive sports car for playboys. But as sales rolled in, including valuable feedback from the people buying those cars, it became clear. The Mustang was a car for men and women, and the marketing team listened. Women began to appear in marketing material, and not just as a pretty set dressing. They were operating the car. They owned the car. Not at all surprising today, even kind of silly to say out loud, but this was non-trivial in 1964. For women, the marketing team focused on how easy the Mustang was to operate, how efficient it was. It was the sweetheart of the supermarket set. Ford wanted women to use the Mustang to flirt with while loading groceries. Ads told women to make sure to wave to their neighborhood gas station attendants because even though they no longer needed to stop for gas as often, they might still one day need that attendant's help to fix a flat tire. One television ad showed a woman looking at a Mustang on her secretary's salary. This ad was one of the leading reasons it was referred to as a secretary's car.
Ford Mustang. What do you think?
I think it's the secretary's car.
Showcasing visions of the shopper performing stunts, enjoying the nightlife, and of course, a full send into matrimony via sports car. A woman's version of the Mustang pledge meant remembering to turn off the parking brake, sticking to a diet, and keeping the quote helpless female look by only driving an automatic. Yikes. Okay, so 2 steps forward for Ford actually advertising to women, but maybe 1 step back for hiring Don Draper to write the ads. But other brands got in on the Mustang love as well. One Tussie ad read, "Wear a Mustang to match your lipstick," featuring a bright pink Mustang that you could enter to win. But it was the song Mustang Sally, popularized by Wilson Pickett, that seemed to actually capture why women were so drawn to the Mustang. Formula was simple, and it was the same reason that men loved the car. It was fast, and it looked good. Did women buying and driving Mustangs slow down sales for male buyers? Nope, it doesn't look like it did. The pony wars were just heating up. Dear Margaret, I pen these words to you by the glow of headlight, here upon the front lines of the pony wars. My safety is by no means certain, and my hope is that this letter finds you well, if it finds you at all. I feel compelled to record what I have witnessed, lest time or fate consign it to oblivion. The Ford Mustang, noble and proud, was the first of its kind, and from its very name sprang the title of this new breed, the pony car. But alas, peace was never to be. The prior automotive wars and egos of men in boardrooms and garages alike would see to that. It was not enough that a battle was brewing between muscle. No, a battle must also be drawn between performance sporty coupes as well. The SCCA at first thought to quell this rising unrest through sport and created the Trans-American Sedan Championship in the spring of 1966. But this act only further boiled the blood of the Big Three and fanned the embers of war when Dodge's Dart nearly took the crown from the new Mustang. But they failed. Dodge and its kin at Plymouth vowed vengeance and swore upon their flat-top combustion chambers that they would return stronger. Chevrolet ended Ford's nearly uncontested supremacy in October 1966 when the Camaro arrived. It was not enough to win SCCA racing titles, though Chevrolet swore to win those too. This battle now took to the streets themselves, and thus began the Pony Wars in earnest. The new Dart and its stodgier cousin, the Plymouth Valiant, were backed by an all-new and ever more powerful Barracuda. They were now ready to enact their revenge. Ford summoned aid, calling upon Mercury and its Cougar, but the Cougar may have drawn more sales from the Mustang than it did Ford's competitors. Chevrolet called in its own reinforcements in the form of the Pontiac Firebird. By February of 1967, there stood 7 proud warriors in this great conflagration. The fighting, my dearest Margaret, was fierce and unrelenting. Even the independents, brave and foolhardy alike, could not resist the bloodlust. American motors hurled the Javelin into battle that autumn. In 1968, the Z28 Camaro took the Trans Am Championship, winning 10 of 13 races and vanquishing the Mustang for the first time. Each passing year, the machines grow larger, meaner, and more unruly, urged onward by the hands of executives and the whispers of admin in their ears. The as-mentioned Camaro Z28, the SS, the Barracuda Formula S, the 7-liter big block Hemi Dart, the Eliminator, SSTs and AMXs, GT350s, Mach 1s, Boss 429s. I beseech thee, Margaret, what is a pony car? I fear I no longer know, and I tremble to speak the answer aloud. The battle lines spill now into the muscle car wars, and to sort between them is a task for philosophers and madmen. There is no end to this in sight. These pony wars shall burn forever, as long as gasoline is inexpensive and safety regulations remain lax. I shall carry on, providing these machines with the oil they crave and the tires they burn in ritual sacrifice upon the roads and raceways of our once tranquil land. If this letter ever finds your hands, please remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe. With my love, your special friend. Letter from an anonymous soldier at the front lines of the Pony Wars, March 1973. R.J. Miller was one of 10 officers from the Office of Statistical Control who called themselves the Whiz Kids. In 1945, as World War II was coming to an end, the Whiz Kids made a pact to stick together and take their skills to the private sector with the goal of bettering a corporation for the prosperity of America and its people. Pretty noble career goals, all in all. Also, the money was a lot better. Charles Thornton, de facto leader of the Whiz Kids and known as Tex to his friends, stumbled across an article in Life magazine about Ford naming Henry Ford II its new president and CEO during a time Ford was having financial difficulties. Thornton reached out. He told Ford his group could save the company, and Ford hired all 10 Whiz Kids. Coming into the organization, they quickly earned the nickname the Quiz Kids because they asked so many questions. They turned the company around and found themselves in senior management positions as a result. Thornton left Ford in 1948, but Robert McNamara, who was also one of the Whiz Kids, became president of Ford in 1960. Actually, he became president of Ford the same day John F. Kennedy won against Richard Nixon. McNamara stepped down 8 weeks later to join Kennedy's administration as the Secretary of Defense and helped Kennedy with a little problem that was starting to develop in Vietnam. R.J. Miller became president of Ford in May 1963 and was serving in the role during the Mustang's development, its release, and the first few years at market. Ralph Nader's 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed, didn't critique Ford quite as directly as its rival Chevrolet, but Miller was forced to address industry practices regarding safety equipment and reassure customers that this was something Ford was investing time and effort into. Unsafe at Any Speed spurred the creation of the Department of Transportation that gave regulatory control over Ford, which Miller was also forced to deal with. He pledged to support whatever the federal researchers recommended. This, combined with Miller's personal efforts in the aftermath of the 1967 Detroit riots, in which Miller began and chaired the Economic Development Corporation of Greater Detroit to nurture and strengthen small businesses owned by Black Americans, resulted in Ford making a surprise announcement that Samon Knudsen, known as Bunkie, would be taking over as president of Ford in 1968. Miller would be moved into the vice chairman role, a role made specifically for him. Miller didn't know about any of this, and he ended up leaving Ford in 1969. Bunkie
Knudsen
came to Ford from General Motors, where he had recently been passed over for promotion to president of GM in favor of Ed Cole. Bunkie brought with him renowned designer Larry Shinoda, who helped design the Stingray and led the design of the C3 Corvette based on his Mako Shark concept. Shinoda got to work right away, revising Ford's Mustang SR2 concept and renaming it the Boss 302. He said Boss was chosen because it expressed the car's unique personality as a performance car. It was a name the kids understood instantly. But Bunkie wanted the Mustang to be meaner. Bunkie believed Americans wanted bigger cars. In late 1968, he ordered a major facelift for the 1971 model year as 1969 sales figures started rolling in. The Mustang wouldn't be a pony car, it would be a muscle car. Bunkie looked at the Boss 302 and demanded the 429 be put under the hood to homologate the engine for use in NASCAR. When Ford engineers insisted it wouldn't fit, he hired an outside company to make it happen. Thus was born the Boss 429. And elsewhere in Ford, suddenly the prototypes for the upcoming Thunderbird had a big triangular beak protruding from the front end. Another Bunkie order. As you can imagine, there was some infighting at Ford. Turns out springing a surprise leadership change at a major automaker might be a bad idea. Notably, a camp began to grow around Lee Iacocca, who had a loyal contingent that we already know from part 1 that would keep his secrets and fight for him. Iacocca didn't like Bunkie, or the way he was handling the Mustang. This was Iacocca's special project Bunkie was messing with. A nameplate heavily associated with Iacocca himself. A pony car wasn't supposed to be a full-size muscle car, no matter how much the most performance-oriented customers loved it. A performance Mustang is great and all, but there's still supposed to be a Mustang. At least that's how Iacocca saw it. In 1916, Henry Ford was quoted saying, "History is more or less bunk," which was Ford's way of saying to live in the present. The phrase "history is bunk" was common in the halls of Ford as a result. But in September 1969, the phrase heard whispered in those halls was instead, "Bunkie is history." Bunkie was dismissed from Ford, but his Mustang redesign was far too long to stop now. It would hit showroom floors a year later, in October 1970. Before we get into the fallout, let's take a look at the model differences in the breakdown.
Hey, the breakdown!
Like the 1965 to 1968 Mustangs, the 1969 to 1973 Ford Mustang was a front-engine, rear-wheel drive FR pony car that came in 3 two-door, 4-seat 2+2 body styles, a soft-top convertible, a notchback coupe, and a fastback coupe that was referred to in marketing materials as the sports roof. The 1969 and 1970 Ford Mustang were 187.5 inches long and 71.7 inches wide, making them 4 inches longer and 1 inch wider than the 1968. 1969 Mustangs can be identified by their quad headlights and rear fender scoops, differentiating them from the 1970 models that replaced the outside set of headlights with dual vents and removed the rear fender scoops completely. There were a ton of engines offered across the models and packages, typically identified by the VIN's engine letter code. Keep in mind that the following horsepower figures are in brake horsepower. They were the 250 Thrift Power 6, an L-coated 250 cubic inch 4.1 liter inline 6. It produced 155 horsepower and was fairly rare. The 302 F-code small block V8 producing 210 horsepower. The 302 Boss, a G-coated 302 cubic inch 4.9 liter V8 that produced 290 horsepower and was created so that Ford would meet homologation requirements to compete in Trans Am racing against the Camaro. It was used in the Boss 302, which added a front spoiler, rear wing, featured hockey stick striping, and removed the scoops from the rear fenders. Just over 7,000 Boss 302s were sold. The 351 H-code Windsor 2-barrel V8 produced 250 horsepower, but was replaced in 1970 by the 351 H-code Cleveland 2-barrel V8. Likewise, the 351 M-code Windsor 4-barrel V8 produced 290 horsepower and had a higher compression ratio than the H-coded 351, but was replaced a year later by the 351 M-code Cleveland 4-barrel V8 that made 10 more horsepower. The FE 6.4-liter V8 from the 1968 Mustang, with a 4-barrel Venturi carburetor, was continued into the 1969 model year, but dropped the power from 335 to 320 horses. The Cobra Jet, a 428 cubic inch 7-liter big block V8 that produced 335 horsepower. The Super Cobra Jet was a variation of the Cobra Jet that had a strengthened crankshaft and rods specifically for drag racing. Lastly, the Boss 429, a semi-Hemi version of the 429 engine developed for use in NASCAR, though the street use version had to be slightly detuned to be compliant. It was a Z-code 429 7-liter big block V8 that produced 375 horses and is considered the ultimate first-gen Mustang power plant to ever leave the factory. The Mach 1 was introduced in 1969 with a Windsor Cleveland, FE, and Cobra Jet Super Cobra Jet engines under the hood. They were cooled by a shaker scoop that was mounted to the engine and protruded through an opening in the hood. It, shook with the engine. The Mach 1 also had dual exhaust, hood pins, custom striping, special wheels, a chin spoiler, a rear wing, and rear window louvers. In 1970, the Mustang GT was discontinued due to the Mach 1 success. The redesigned 1971 to 1973 Ford Mustangs were 189.5 inches long and 74.1 inches wide, making them 2 inches longer and wider than the 69 and 70s. The hardtop coupe now featured tunnelback fins that continued along the length of the rear fenders. And at the rear of the car, the tri-bar taillights were made more trapezoidal in shape. The Mach 1 received some updates, specifically having a pop-open gas cap, amber sport lamps added to the grille, and an optional hood with dual NACA scoops. Starting in 1971, under the hood could be found the Q-code 5.8-liter Cleveland Cobra Jet V8 that produced 285 horsepower in 1971, but dropped to 266 in 72 and 73. The J-code 429 cubic inch 7-liter Rochester Quadrajet Cobra Jet that produced 370 horsepower. And the R-code 351 5.8-liter Cleveland V8 that produced 330 horsepower in 1971 before dropping to 275 horses in 1972. It was only offered in the Boss 351. The 1972 model is virtually identical to the 1971, except that added to the passenger side dash was a small panel that reads, "Fasten Seatbelt." In 1973, the amber sport lamps were made standard to comply with visibility regulations. but they were rotated into a vertical position. This is the quickest way to identify a 1973 Mustang. Now you know how to tell them apart. Let's get back to the story. For Ford, the 1969 Mustang wasn't a disaster, but it was close. Sales fell below 300,000 units for the first time since launch, down from the 1966 Mustang's peak of 607,000. What had been a phenomenon was suddenly stalling, and Ford was spooked. They looked at what they were doing and evaluated their next move. Each year of the Mustang since the 1966 model had made the car larger than the year before. It grew in inches and weight. They paused. Was this the wrong move, making the car bigger and more powerful? Customers said that's what they wanted. Was it some other factor that was resulting in decreasing sales? Perhaps the car was too gaudy, too overstyled. For 1970, Ford designers played it safe, taking the 69 and styling it back a little. Surely that would increase sales. Bunkie didn't seem to think so, and, as we know, ordered the 1971 redesign during his short tenure, more like 10 months, at the helm. 1970 sales numbers hurt even worse. In total, less than 200,000 units sold. By this point, Ford was in crisis over what to do with the Mustang. Lee Iacocca now led the company as president, having replaced Bunkie in 1970. Henry Ford II put pressure on Iacocca to deliver, to put his money where his mouth was after ousting the last guy in what was just short of a managerial mutiny. Despite Iacocca having little love for Bunkie's design, maybe Bunkie was right after all. Maybe he knew that a radical redesign and a bigger car would stave off sales drops. Maybe Ford hadn't gone far enough with the 69 and 70. Bunkie's design was about to debut, and there was little else to do but watch and see if it worked. If it did, everyone at Ford owed Bunkie a big apology. Yeah, it didn't work. Sales slumped even further. 1971 sold half as well as the 1969. The car was somehow bigger, but less powerful. It weighed 1,000 pounds more than the original 1965. Fingers started flying, trying to lay blame. Fans, the media, and management alike pointed to safety and efficiency equipment added. That comfort options came at a compromise. In December 1970, President Richard Nixon signed a law and thus created regulatory agencies that were about to have a big impact on automobile manufacturing. First, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, would be given the teeth to crack down on industrial and commercial polluting. And second, several automotive safety agencies that would become the National Highway Traffic Safety Agency, or NHTSA, would formalize vehicle safety standards and issue requirements to manufacturers that must be adhered to. Otherwise, those vehicles could not be sold in the United States. For the muscle car, the writing was on the wall, or in this case, Nixon's hands, and by extension, the pony car, or what the pony car had become by this point. A pony car is supposed to be fun, affordable, compact, and if that's what a pony car is, then by this time, the Mustang was a pony car in name only. Could Ford market this new Mustang to the women it felt were such an important part of the original demographic? I doubt it. They didn't even try. Most of the ads featured dudes swinging golf clubs or tennis rackets, or at best driving their Mustangs with a literal canyon of space between them and their girlfriends sitting in the passenger seat. In trying to win the battle, Ford lost the war simply by positioning themselves out of the very market they created. Every first-generation Mustang will turn heads wherever it goes, even the 71 to 73s, but the 69s and 70s stop traffic. They are perhaps the most iconic Mustangs ever made, and while Ford was scrambling to dissect what it was that consumers wanted, it feels like they were overlooking a winning design formula. Doing research for these videos, I go through a lot of books. Of the covers that featured the first-generation Mustangs, most seem to have 69s or 70s. Type Mustang calendar into image search, and you'll see what I mean. When John Wick needed the coolest car ever to drive, the director chose a 1969. Boss 302 or 429 appears in just about every major racing game franchise, including Need for Speed, Gran Turismo, Forza, and The Crew. 69 and 70 Boss 302s, 429s, and Shelbys routinely hit over $200,000 in auction. The top 5 highest selling Mustang auctions on Bring a Trailer are all 1965 Shelby GT350s except one, a 1969 Boss 429 that went for $410,000. In May, a 1970 sold at Mecum for $570K. Yeah, love for the 69 and 70 is inescapable, but a love for the 1971 to 73 is just as strong, even if it's not as popular. I've got a confession. I've been pretty hard on the early 70s Mustangs in this video, and maybe for good reason. But the 71 to 73s are some of my favorite years of the Mustang. Time has softened the 71, 72, and 73's reputation, and the enthusiasts who love them today have tried to rehabilitate their image. The first generation Mustang, all of it, keeps the pony car spirit alive thanks to the community in the form of clubs, meetups, fundraisers, online groups and forums, and social media. One of these groups even recreates the original SCCA Trans Am pony car races virtually, among other races, using the game Forza Motorsport. The first-gen Mustang is one of the most beloved cars of all time. It makes sense that its community is still thriving. Iacocca hated Bunkie's Mustang. It was too big, too bloated. It lacked the original vision Iacocca conceived in secret and worked so hard to get approved. And as sales continued to trickle in, it seemed the public agreed with Iacocca. Government regulation was really dampening the muscle car spirit as well, as fuel efficiency standards reduced horsepower, while crash safety standards added weight. The final nail in the coffin for the muscle cars came in 1973 when OPEC withheld its oil and the price of formerly dirt-cheap gasoline went soaring. It's a good thing Iacocca was already cooking something up. It was time for a new Mustang, a sequel to the original. A Mustang 2. Hey all, thanks for watching this part of the Ford Mustang series. I had a lot of fun making this episode and I'm really eager to tell the story of the Mustang 2 in part 3. If there's a car you think I should cover in a future video, let me know in the comments below. I'm keeping tabs on the number of requests. Many thanks to my Patreon patrons and channel members, whose names you see on the screen. As always, I can never say thanks enough. Come join our Discord by signing up on Patreon. Or if you want, check out the R Make and Model subreddit or follow me on Instagram at It's Rick Pierce to see what I'm up to when I'm not making videos. This is the end of the video. For this one, let me know you made it by adding a flexing arm emoji in the comments to represent the time the Mustang almost became a muscle car. And because it's fun. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching.
Knudsen.